Welcome back into the Sports Source. It's our pleasure to welcome in a new sponsor this week, Jinx Logos. And you see the phone number right there. That is the phone number for Jimmy Andrews, who runs Jinx Logos. He is a one-man business, kind of like myself, and that means he's constantly trying to make sure that he's pleasing his clientele in any way. Well, you look at the items that Jinx Logos sells. Let me show you this. Come on back here. Look at this. Golf bags with your embroidered logo, okay? Your company embroidered logo right there like the Sports Source. Golf bag. Price on this? Under $30. It's in the $20 range. Thank you, Mike. This from the Tiger Woods collection, this jacket, which somewhere on it has the sleeve, which has our logo on it. There we go. Tiger Woods collection, right there, still in the $20 range. Unbelievable. They got golf shirts from Cutter and Buck, Glen Echo, all of these with the logo now in the 20s. We got Bob Hodge decked out in one of these today. Since he went and bought a boat from Madisonville Marine, I thought the least I could do is give him a shirt. We use Jinx Logos, and I can't say enough about them. They have a great deal right now in terms of inventory in there. If you call them the golf bags, jackets, shirts, if you've got a golf tournament coming up, Jimmy, if you have a sales staff you're trying to outfit, call Jinx Logos because they're all about customer service. Not only do they have these great deals where everything you see there is in the $20 range with the logo included, but also you deal with them once, you'll deal with them time and time again. I've used folks like this since my days as a marketing director in Columbus, Ohio, and let me tell you, you're not going to find pricing, you're not going to find relationship building like you see from Jinx Logos. I'm very impressed with them. Call them. All right. Now, I want to show in this segment some numbers. There's a lot of talk about Tennessee being the only team in the FBS, so it's 125 teams, this year that is having to replace its entire offensive and defensive lines. Went back and looked. They're also, if we can go to the board there where Chuck is, can we? Yeah, we can see it there. Also, the last 2 years, nobody's done this. So it's not just this year. No one last year replaced their entire offensive and defensive lines. When you look at those numbers, those teams, we went back and checked to find those teams who had 5 or fewer anywhere on offense and defense, which is what Tennessee's returning. Chuck, if you could write this in, there were 21 schools that have had 5 or 5 on either side, is the most they've returned in the last 4 seasons. Those teams, here's what you need to write, 110 and 150. 110-150. Those 21 schools combined to go 110 and 150. That averages out to a 5-7 record. Oh, I'm sorry, not 110, 150.
Wow, that would be horrible.
It's January 10th of 2150. Anyway, so that averages out to a 5-7 season. But that's on a national scale. So what we have here, if Chuck can step just a little bit to you, there we go. We got Tennessee, Arkansas, Florida, Texas A&M, Auburn, Alabama, Vanderbilt, Ole Miss. These are the last 4 years. Teams in the SEC, and no one has lost all 5 offensive linemen and all 4 defensive linemen. So that's, we can't even compare. There's nothing to compare this to. So what we're looking at, teams that lost, that returned, I should say, teams that returned only 11 or fewer starters. And I wanted to see how they did. So you got Tennessee up there, 2013. They have 10 starters returning. Arkansas in 2012 and 13. Florida last year as well. Let's flip that first card over there on the right and see how those teams have done. Not easy. See, it's tougher than it looks. Right there we got Tennessee 5-7. Of course, we don't know what they're going to do this year. The record for Arkansas, they were 4-8. They had 11 starters back. They went 3-9. They've lost 1 game. They fell by 1 game. Then you got Florida. Look at this. Now, granted, they had injuries, but 11-2. They returned only 11 starters, and they went to 4-8. That is a 6.5 game switch. All right, Chuck, let's look at the next ones. You got Texas A&M, Auburn, and Alabama. And those Auburn and Alabama teams, folks, those are national championship squads. All right. Texas A&M went 11-2 a couple of years ago. They had 10 starters back last year. Even with Johnny Manziel, they fell by 2 games down to 9-4. Auburn, after they lost Cam Newton and crew, they only had 7 starters back. They went from 14-0 to 8-5. That's a 5.5 game dip. Then you got Alabama, national champions in 2009, 14-0. The next year, they were worse by 3.5 games. They fell to 9-3. That's Nick Saban with 10 starters returning off a national championship team. He fell 3.5 games. The last 2 here, you go back to 2009 and 10, is Vanderbilt and Ole Miss. Let's go ahead and flip those. See how they did. And again, these guys are all comparable to what Tennessee is returning this year. Vanderbilt, hey, they kept the record the same at 2-10.
All right.
And then Ole Miss went from 9-4. They had 11 starters back, 4-8. The difference of 4.5 games. Overall, that averages out. And Chuck, you can walk on in here, but the gist there is there have been 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 teams in the SEC over the last 4 years who've lost a comparable amount of talent from their starting lineup as Tennessee has. They have averaged about a 3-game dip in terms of the next year's record. Tennessee was 5-7 last year. Chuck, how much stock do you put in this? Is that just every team is its own thing, or do you look at that as a trend and say,
no, I mean, that is an undeniable trend, and when it happens to Alabama, it can happen anywhere.
Guys?
You're a glass half empty, John. I see Alabama went 9-3.
Okay.
After all those starters. Tennessee got 9-3.
And there are people saying that right now. All right, mainly because Alabama wasn't 5-7 the previous year. Thoughts, guys?
I think that Tennessee, we've said all along, I think it's going to be hard for Tennessee to be as good as they were last year. The good news for Tennessee fans is you were 5-7. So you're probably not going to fall off the edge of the world. You're probably going to be somewhere around 5-7 again, even though you're going to have less talent. So that's the glass half full thing. Hey, you can go 5-7 again.
The disconcerting thing is that none of those improved. So you're 5-7. Basically your goal, I think, for most reasonable people is to go 6-6 and get in a bowl game. Not one of those improved.
And on top of
that makes it tough.
It's how your offensive and defensive lines were decimated on top of what you lost. That, to me, is like the double whammy.
I agree. See, that's the thing. When you look at that list, nobody else up there lost their entire offensive line, their entire defensive line, and they all declined. Now Tennessee loses all that. They've got an influx of talent. There's no question from this latest recruiting class, but it's young talent. There are people right now who are saying you guys are just making excuses for them. I think you can go over and ask UT. We don't make a lot of excuses for UT on the show. We're doling out factual reality here, and I think if you take that into consideration and you look at what's happened in the SEC, it's hard to go into this year thinking bowl game's the minimum, and I say 7 or 8 wins. If they do it, they'll be making history to do that. So, all right, when we come back, Jerron Toney, Pig Howard, the quarterback situation, we talk UT football. Come on back on the Sports Source.
You are watching East Tennessee's first and only year-round sports talk show on television.